Hey everybody, it's Paul from One Cast One Fish, and follow along as we replace this Minn Kota Terrova trolling motor with a brand new Garmin Force. Now first things first, we're going to have to get in here and we're going to have to unbolt this trolling motor from the bow. One thing that is going to make this removal job a little bit easier for me is that I did mount the quick disconnect from Minn Kota for this Terrova trolling motor. Which means I'll basically just pull the motor right off the bracket and then unbolt the bracket from the bow. All I need to do to remove the trolling motor is unscrew this right here. Make sure all of our wires are disconnected and nothing's holding onto the trolling motor. And now this trolling motor should slide right off. That made that job a whole lot easier. Now all we need to do is remove our actual mounting bracket. Removal should be pretty easy. We have some bolts up here on top that go underneath into here and are secured with a washer and a locking nut. Alright, I'm not going to let you guys watch me for too long struggling here to reach up under here and try to get these undone. Finally, bolt number 1 out. Last bolt right here, and then the quick disconnect plate should come off. Perfect. And everything underneath there looks like it's in really good shape still. We'll clean that up a little bit and start prepping to put the new trolling motor on. We want to clean that up real good because I want to start with a good mating surface again. At this point, we got the trolling motor removed from the bow, and it's getting a little bit late for today, so I'm actually going to take the time now to clean up everything because I have quite the mess here inside the boat. And what we're going to do is I'm going to get back at it tomorrow. Alright, so we're back at it. Yesterday we were able to get the trolling motor removed, and now we're going to take and open up the box and start installing this new Garmin Force. There's definitely a lot of parts and pieces here, so I think first thing we're going to do is look for the instruction book. So hiding down in the box, we were able to find the template for mounting the plate, and over here in this box, it looks like the instructions are hiding. So we're going to break those open, and we're going to take a look at them and do a little reading. Make sure we get this thing installed correctly. So to prepare and drill our holes, we actually have a template that Garmin supplies. However, I'm not going to be using it because for the actual mount, I can actually see the holes, and it's a whole lot easier for me just to do it with the actual mount itself. I'm going to simply take our mount and lift it into place. Then I'm going to line it up according to the considerations and instructions with a little bit of overhang on the bow. Then I'm going to look to see how everything lines up. Now the one thing I did notice is that my old bolt holes do not correspond with these new ones. So we'll be drilling a few new holes. Once we have everything lined up how we like it, we're going to come in and we're going to mark those holes. Now this next part's pretty important. I'm actually going to reach down in under the bow and I'm going to feel to make sure that there's mounting backing plate underneath there for where these screws and holes are going to be. Because that mounting and backing plate, that's what's really going to take and support most of the weight of this trolling motor. So we got pretty lucky. It looks like we're going to have good backing plate to mount everything. Now we're able to remove the mounting bracket and we'll start drilling some holes. Let's head back to the instructions now. Once you get everything pretty much in place, you're going to use a 5/16 inch drill bit to drill the mounting holes. And then step 6, which is probably the most important in this instruction set, is to remember to place the safety strap under the mount base near the center with the hook and loop fasteners facing downward. And that's because if you forget to do this, you're going to have to disassemble some of the motor later to install it. Once everything's set in place, we're going to mount it with the supplied bolts, washers, and locking nuts, and then torque everything down to about 8 foot-pounds. Now one thing that's super important is anytime you're drilling into fiberglass, you want to start small. Now with the small pilot holes drill, we're going to start working up in size. Now we're ready to make our final pass. Now with our final pass complete, we're going to wipe everything up. Now another thing you want to do to make sure you get no cracks is put a small countersink in each of those holes. Just like so. And that'll help to make sure that there's no cracks that start or spread from that hole. At this point in the instructions, we're going to put the mounting plate back on and bolt everything up. Get all of our holes lined up, put our first bolt in to hold it in place. Well, I read the instructions to you guys and talk about the important step of remembering to put the strap underneath before you tighten everything down. Luckily for me, I didn't tighten everything down, but I did get all my bolts in place, ready to tighten down, and I forgot the strap. So we're gonna go back and put the strap in place. Luckily for me, I'm able to still slide the strap underneath here. One thing to note from the instructions is that this hook and latch part of the Velcro needs to be facing down. So luckily for us, we didn't bolt everything down permanently, so we're able to still pull it up and kind of slide that strap underneath. Now that we got our strap in place, we can go back to tightening the trolling motor bolts. Now we're going to install our locking nut and washer underneath to secure everything. The next step has us pivoting the lower link mount forward until it locks into the base. That should be simple enough. And we'll pivot this base on forward. And lock it in place. Next, we'll make sure the two safety rods are inserted as far as possible. And they are. Now we're going to move over to the trolling motor to make sure the bushings are installed on the servo. And we can see right here that our bushings are pressed in and installed. Now we're going to get into the fun part, installing the motor to the mounting bracket. So the first thing we're going to want to do is take our cable here, and we're going to want to pull it up out of the way, make sure it stays in that groove there. And the best thing I found to do is take it to the end here, and we're just going to put a piece of tape on it to hold it in place. Now we're going to do the heavy lifting, pull the motor out of the box, and mount it using the pivot pin. Now I don't know how well I'll be able to show this in the video since it's only myself, but when we get that mounting up here, we're going to slide our pivot pin through, just like so. Definitely a difficult part to do by yourself. There we go. Got that pivot pin pressed all the way through. And that's what it looks like when you're finished. You have that bushing and that pivot pin pressed all the way through on both sides. Remember that cable we had the tape to hold in place? Now we're going to take that pull cable and we're going to route it through the head unit. As you can see right here, there's a spot where it's going to come right up through. Now we're going to look at how to install the gas springs. This is going to be another one of those that take a little bit of ingenuity and hard work, especially by yourself. Because you're going to want to lift this motor on up. And all I did is kind of propped it up here on the trailer. And you can see the gas spring here. This is the part that we're going to be attaching. Now when we set this gas spring up, we're going to want to take and make sure there's a hole here that's going to intersect with this rod piece here. Then there's two additional screw holes that's going to hold everything in place. Now for attachment of the gas spring, I found that it's easier to actually pull the trolling motor up. And we'll lay it flat here so we have a good working surface. I'm going to want to pull that cable to release everything and hold on tight because the trolling motor isn't light. We're going to kind of just lift it into place. Now as it's coming back, I want to take and make sure that gas spring, we take it with it, because if we leave it down here inside the mount, you're not going to be able to get it pulled up once everything's laid flat. Now with everything flat, you'll see here, like I said, this makes it a whole lot easier to take and just move that, and we'll be able to mount it. Again, we want to make sure that the first one is attached perfectly with that rod and everything lines up just like so. And now we'll be able to bolt it on down. Now there was no torque specs for these, so I'm assuming good and tight should work. With the other gas spring in place, we'll attach this one now as well. And it should tighten down into place without any problems. Again, making sure that rod is attached to the mounting point. Now we're ready to mount our next linking pin, which is going to take this upper cover plate and it's going to connect it right here at the head unit. So we're going to want to pull this forward, and we're going to want to make sure nothing is in the way here. And you can see it's not going to just slide right over top there. So we're probably going to have to tilt and move this a little bit to get everything back up underneath to where we can put this pin in place. Alright, that worked out just fine. Now we'll get that pin installed. Once we get the pin all the way in place, there's going to be 2 small screws and washers that are going to go and hold it in place. Now they do try to throw you for a little bit of a loop here because instead of a regular screw head, it's actually an Allen key head on these screws. And chances are you're going to need 2, so you can hold it in place so it doesn't spin while you take and tighten it. Now with those nice and snug, on to the next step. Next we'll squeeze up in here and put the connector for power to the display on the unit. And we need to plug that in right there. And that's, like I said, it's the power for all this display up top. Now we're getting a little closer to the end of this install. We're going to be installing the handle to our pull cable. Now to install the pull cable handle, all we're going to do is take our pull cable, slide it up through the bottom of our handle. Now we'll install a supplied washer and the supplied pin. And we're going to slide through that hole right there. And that'll lock everything into place. The next step is to install the top cap, which is pretty easy, and you have 2 supplied mounting screws. Now these screws are pretty small, so be careful you don't lose them. And that's it for our pull cable. At this point, we're going to start mounting and routing all of our transducer and power cables. Mounting these cables should be fairly easy. We got a nice clean track right here that goes through the side of the motor. And then we're going to attach at these 2 points at the front and the back. First, I'm going to slide the transducer cable through. Now we'll slide the power cable through. Once we get those cables pulled through, now we're going to want to lift the trolling motor up back into the stowed position. Next, we're going to be using the supplied brackets to mount that cable and the transducer cable to the side here to hold it secure. Now in the instructions, it does say to mount the transducer cable over top. And then we're going to do the exact same thing right here in the front. Just when you thought we were done routing cable, we have one more connector that's going to mount everything right here to the base. With that complete, now we're going to make sure we have no binding when putting the trolling motor down or stowing it back up. Now we're going to deploy the trolling motor and make sure there's no pinching or binding on any of the cables. So far, everything looks good. Everything's bending and looking good so far. That's kind of the spot I was a little more worried about. And everything looks good. That looked like a successful deploy, so now we're going to stow it back up and check everything again. Everything looks good. We'll bring the trolling motor on down to the stowed position. Didn't see any issues there, so it looks like all the cabling's good. That'll do it for the mounting of the brand new Garmin Force Trolling Motor. All that's left now is the electrical connections and a few things for the fish finders once we get them installed. And now I'm going to have to start the cleanup of this giant mess that for some reason I always seem to make whenever I do any work out here in the garage. So until next time, we'll see you on the water.